by not thinking about a solution that is comprehensive by experts and people that know what they're doing, you could end up with a costly problem at the end of the day. Right, Brian? What do you think?
It can be very costly. If you have a situation and if you don't have the right plan in place from the experts who can bring these concepts and solutions to you, it will be very costly. I can tell you that because we have seen situations where a business owner passed away and now the spouse wants to be involved and it's a $10 million or $15 million company. And that's big money. And when you start getting attorneys involved and the spouse wants to be involved with the business or the spouse wants her money and there wasn't any planning done beforehand, or the surviving business owner, now the spouse has 50% of the company, he wants to buy her out, it gets expensive and messy. So it's always best to look at these issues beforehand and come up with some planning beforehand.
And Brian, I know you specialize in some of those advanced solutions, but you've seen also your fair share of people that have, from the people you worked with on the simplified solutions. And can you give us some of your experiences in some people that had mistakes or end up with a worse situation or some scenarios that we could help us with here?
Yeah, I'd say probably the most common one is there's lack of review of these of the planning. Is the fact that somebody maybe even puts a plan right in place with their business at the beginning with their partner, and their business goes from $1 million to $2 million to $5 million to $10 million to 15 or $20 million, over a period of time. But that initial agreement is still based on $1 million company. So it's important that we review these in a timely manner, if not every year, at the most every 2 years. I've seen situations where the initial agreement was never reviewed, and now there's an additional partner that came in, or things have changed. If the business is transferred over, initially it was maybe to the spouse, we had to buy her back, but now they don't want to do that. They want to have it transferred to a son who is very good in the business, who's already in the business and wants to move up the ladder to where dad was. It's very important that it's reviewed on a consistent basis. And then, of course, changes are made to meet the objectives, because those objectives of the business owners change from time to time.
No, absolutely. And I believe Brian Tracy is the one that said, well begun, half done. But there's two criteria in here. One, you have to begin. And the earlier you begin, the better it is. Even if you're a small business owner, beginning early, if you expect that you're going to succeed, is important in this process. However, the other part of it is that the other half done. As time passes by, you got to continue evaluating and making sure that you're on track. And sometimes the people that set it up in the beginning may not necessarily be the people that are going to help you finish it or get it even better to completion based on a new situation. Because many business owners evolve into this whole new form of a business that did not expect it to be when they first started.
And if I could just add on to that, Rem, is the fact that when we review this planning process, quite often we find that we need to incorporate an additional solution. Maybe we had one particular type of solution we used at the beginning, but now 5-10 years down the road, there may be another additional solution that we need to come in, and then we put them together, or even a third, so that, again, the objectives of the business owners are met.
Right. And I think, at the end of the day, I think the value of these things never show until you need them and when things happen. And I think that really ends up being the differentiation between somebody who planned and did something and utilized some of those advanced strategies and solutions and somebody that didn't. Because I've seen people that at the end of it, when they have the problem, they're regretting it. They go, God, I wish I did this and I wish I did that. But it's sort of like an accident. You can't go get protection from the accident after you have the accident. You have to have started early. And I've seen it the other way around, where things happen and nobody can help. But because they're so prepared and so set up, that it takes a lot of the pain out of the way. I mean, there's always pain in these things, but it gets less with preparedness.
So, Rem, one other area that needs to be addressed, it's a nationwide issue, is divorce. Whenever somebody gets divorced, either one of the partners, or if there's multiple partners or shareholders, then there needs to be some discussion on how that's going to change the entire plan. So that's an area that sometimes is overlooked.
And the thing with it is that sometimes businesses start, and that's one of the problems, is that when they start, they're not thinking about those issues because they're excited about starting the company. They're busy with what they're doing. There's a lot of goodwill, and maybe even the spouses are friendly and everything else. But then as years go by, things sometimes change, and even including the divorce issues with the partner. And now what was a friendly situation could turn to be a disastrous situation for the other partner, or both partners for that matter. I think that's where some of the issues I think that you address, and I think are extreme value when you look at it, when you help people with figuring it out. So I think big thing of it is really understanding the problem, understanding what could happen. And sometimes 90% of the solutions is knowing what the problem is and what could happen at the end of the day. And if you understand that and prepare for it, it seems like you can really avoid a lot of pain and prepare for partnerships in a way that you didn't think about before.
And I know we've been talking a lot about partnerships, but this also goes towards corporations too, because you have, whether it's two shareholders or multiple shareholders, the same problem problems still exist. Typically, we a lot of times talk about partnerships, but it's a partnership of business owners, no matter what the type of entity it is.
Right. And let's address this a little bit here, Brian. So, could you give an example of some of those issues with corporations, some problem the corporations would face, and some of the solutions that they could undertake?
One area that we find out with corporations is, let's say if you have 5 or 6 different primary shareholders, and if one wants to retire, how do we buy back that stock? Or what do we do with that stock? If we buy it back, or do we retire the stock? Or on that stock, do we then keep it and then give it to another investor? Things of that nature. So corporations have very, very similar to partnerships, but there are some different areas that need to be covered under partnerships themselves. And just real quickly, there's also in a corporation, you may have 1 or 2 very, very major shareholders and some very minor shareholders. So the solution could be different for those. If a major shareholder of $100 million company happens to pass away, how do we buy back those shares? But maybe a minor shareholder in that same company who maybe owns $500,000 of the company, maybe we don't have to buy that back in some form or fashion. Maybe we can find a smaller investor that would take over in that situation. So again, each situation is different.
Yep. And I do know we work with highly specialized attorneys sometimes, and some obviously you know them, that specialize in some of those issues, because some of those issues don't an average attorney that relates, whether it's a business attorney or any other type of attorney, may not necessarily be familiar with. Some of those solutions require sort of big guns to make it work in the right way. But that is sometimes part of the solution is bringing the right experts into the subject, whether it's certain kind of attorneys or CPAs, accountants that are highly specialized. I mean, all these kind of specialties are just not run of the mill kind of a counter attorney or other professionals that can do that. The key to this is to make sure that you are surrounded by the right expertise and experts. And I think, Brian, you've gone a long way with identifying some of those people that could be helpful to the business community.
That's correct. It's a team approach when we come to these types of planning, because obviously there are going to be some legal documents that are drafted. So an attorney has to be involved. The value of the business. So a CPA is going to be, or an accountant is going to need to be involved. And then we can act as a quarterback and bring those two together with the solutions that we need. So we act not only a therapist, I know you'd mentioned that earlier, in terms of bringing out what the objective is of the business owners, but then we act as a quarterback for that team.
Right. And I've seen cases where it's 6 or 7 high-level professionals that are needed to solve the problems and make them work. But the outcome is amazing because you pretty much cover everything. And sometimes it requires one person, sometimes it requires none. So I mean, it's not a necessity, but sometimes you've had situations where you just gave the person some advice on what to do and where to go, that kind of thing. Is that the case?
That's really what we do, is we give advice. We look at the situation and we give advice and what they need to do.
So what we try to do in this particular conversation that we had with you is to sort of help you understand some of the underpinnings of some of the issues. It's a vast topic. So if you are a business owner, you ought to think about this. You ought to think whether your partnership, whether corporation, some of the issues that involve you, your partner, your family, and your partner's family, or your shareholders, or whatever is involved in your company that could, in the end, could affect your legacy and your ability to manage the company, control the company. And it's important for you to start a conversation and understand some of those issues. And I think one of the things we are really passionate and trying to bring to the public and the business community is that the thinking part of it. And by engaging in a conversation, hopefully we can have an impact on you and figuring this out. So again, that's why I mentioned earlier, we set up some office hour times. If you have any questions, just feel free to reach out to us. You'll have the number and we will answer any question and we will direct you. And our objective in here is to be of help to the business community, to be a source of information, to guide you, to let you know where you need to go and what you should be doing. And perhaps even if there's nothing you need to consider, that's a peace of mind, because nothing is worse than wondering, can I do this or should I do this? And maybe you shouldn't. And our job is to tell you that you shouldn't. So the best way is that to think about this is process your situation. Try to see if there are any weakness points. And if you think there's anything that you have a question on, again, feel free to reach out. Brian or me, we will be happy to answer your questions or direct you in the right place.